Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Oh, Mail's here.
Your outpost for the week is freshly delivered, and I am just one of your hosts here, Matthew Rushing, coming at you from an entirely new year, and with me, as she is every single week, the future Drea Coffman.
Hi!
Hello, we're
future.
back. Yeah.
Yes,
well, I mean, we're in
back.
the future. We're in 2021, so that's kind of crazy.
This is the year of Mad Max, apparently.
I mean, yeah, it kind of...
Hang in there, y'all.
It might happen. I wouldn't be surprised, so...
2020 taught me anything. It's not to ever doubt anything. Anything's possible.
Oh, my goodness. Well, we just wanted to say, before we get into the show, of course, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you give us those star rating reviews on Apple Podcasts, and we'll be reading those out on the show. We've got a couple we're going to read out today, so thank you. And, of course, again, you can get us anywhere, and just make sure you're subscribed so you get the show as soon as it drops. You can find us on Twitter at Join Nerd Party. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/The Nerd Party. Of course, there's thenerdparty.com, where you can go over to the contact section, and you can send Dre and I an email, which, Dre, we actually have an email to read as well, and this is from Abigail. And she said, "Hiya, guys. First, I wanted to thank you for your commitment to finishing the podcast. It's such a struggle when my webtoons or book series just stop and never get completed. I need catharsis. Secondly, I've heard some listeners throwing out suggestions on what to do on your sequel podcast together, so I thought I'd throw out my 2 cents as well. Though I would totally understand if you need a break. Not necessarily from each other, and certainly not breaking from Harry Potter altogether, but y'all have more than earned a reprise for your multi-year commitment. To the point."
I don't know, Matt. Do you need a break from me?
I mean, let's talk about it later. No.
This is like a bad marriage, y'all. I'm sorry, go on.
She said, to the point, I liked that you did a spoiler-free version of the podcast. I was hoping that you wouldn't, but I totally understand and respect the decision to do so. However, my suggestion in the future is that you go back through the series, not chapter by chapter necessarily, because that would take so long and wouldn't be much different from the last podcast, and do a spoiler version of Outpost. That way you can point out all the little details where she connects through the series and go back to the beginning. I don't know what format that would take. Would make the most sense, whether to be chronologically, one connection thread at a time, or by subject. I would really be interested in seeing that and hear someone else's take and insight on all your connections that JK made throughout the books. Whatever y'all decide, I most definitely will be listening. Similarly to the comment in your last week, you guys are my first podcast, so thank you for a wonderful intro into the world of easy listening. It has made a world of difference in the hours I've been spending preparing online lessons for my fantastic 4th graders. I know I speak for more than just myself when I say that you guys have been a huge help during the quarantine season, and many blessings to you both in the new year in Christ, Abby." Well, thank you so much, Abby, because we really appreciate that. You have no idea, we had a difficult year just like everybody else, and honestly, I just really appreciate what you had to say, and we have no idea how we're going to go into the future, or what if we do another podcast or what things would look like. But we really appreciate that you're interested in listening to us. We do know for sure we'll be continuing the Fantastic Beasts series on the 602 Club whenever that new movie comes out, and we'll be continuing that together. But yeah, thank you so much. Goodness, that was just amazing.
Well, and to be a teacher during quarantine,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a handful of COVID professions that, while I had a lot of admiration for them ahead of time, it's definitely been amplified in 2020 and onward. And teaching is definitely one of those. My husband and I joked when our daughter was out of daycare, she's only 3, for a while, and going back, that we definitely do not pay teachers or childcare providers enough. And so, we definitely commend you for what you do for those 4th graders and continuing to stay dedicated, even when we know it's not the easiest of jobs and always the most rewarding of jobs. So, that alone is definitely, we appreciate you sharing your passion and your joy with them because it came through in the email. So Thank you, Abby, both for your comments and for continuing to, to care for those fourth graders.
Yeah, 100%. And so we got a couple of reviews here as well on Apple Podcasts, and of course, as always, we read those out when we get them. It says, amazing podcast. This is from Z-Barn. This podcast is amazing. I listen to it while I'm writing and working on school assignments. The books are awesome, but this podcast helps me to understand the books a little better than before. Listening to this also brings back memories of reading the books for the first time. Great work. Thumbs up. Well, thank you, and it is kind of fun because it reminds me of getting the opportunity to read the books for the first time because I can kind of remember what that was like. So, yeah, it's been super fun, for us, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
And then,
good luck in your studies.
Yeah, another review here. It says, I like it. This one's only 4 stars. This one's from Cimmerillion 995, and they say, I like this podcast a lot, and I like how it goes through the chapters at a steady pace, but my only one issue is that the intros are a bit too long, and it takes a while for them to start talking about the chapter. Other than this, I think this is a great podcast. I'm sorry so much, Cimmerillion 995, that we've spent... I think
this is going to be a long one, too.
7 minutes
Hang in there,
before
guys.
we have gotten to the chapter here. But we had so many people to thank, and we appreciate your review, and thank you so much for listening, too. Well, Drea, I think that it is time for us to dive into this chapter, and it's chapter 26. It's Gringotts, and, I think it's really interesting that we, start off this chapter, and Hermione, the plan that they have, she's not loving it because she has to use the wand of Bellatrix Lestrange, and she hates this wand. And Harry's attitude towards her is hysterical. He doesn't say everything he'd like to say to her because he's like, Hermione, remember that time when you thought I was crazy for not saying this other wand that wasn't really working for me? Yeah, remember that time? It was like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's really one of those interesting moments, and I think it's something we've talked about with Hermione a few times, that she tends to have to speak from a very empirical perspective. And for her, the thing he's been complaining about for a while, and the thing we've been talking about for at least this whole book, is this idea of wands kind of having their own soul, their own personality, their own feelings. And this sort of just continues to expand upon that with her experiencing this wand's feelings and her sort of interaction with it, that she never really believed until she got to actually experience it for herself. And I also think what's really interesting about that is I feel like it speaks a little bit to something that comes up a lot last year, and I think will continue to come up and has come up for decades, let's be honest, is privilege, right? Like, she's had the privilege of operating with a wand that agreed with her. It was her wand, right? The wand chose the wizard. And this is sort of the first time where she's at sort of a disadvantage with that, and she's not afforded the opportunity to have a wand that wants to play along with her. And she's going to have to go through at least this chapter with sort of a disobedient wand and really be a better wizard than she would have had to have before. And so, it's just a little thing, but, she is kind of complaining about it, and Harry does sort of have a little bit of vindicated to him that, she finally understands what he's been saying.
Well, and I mean, it's really interesting, because Hermione does have a point with just how evil this wand is. I mean, it's the wand that killed Sirius. It's the wand that tortured Neville's mom and dad.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a wand that has done so many very evil things, and so to have to use this wand is terrible. And Harry also reminds himself, too, in his own mind, just that it probably doesn't work as well for her because she didn't win it from Bellatrix. And we know that's one of the reasons where he's using Draco's wand right now, and it's actually very agreeable to him. In fact, it works for him just as well as Hermione's wand ever did. So he's actually feeling pretty comfortable because he finally has a wand again that, actually is something he enjoys using and isn't such a, it's not like it's fighting against him. So I thought that was really interesting as well.
Well, I mean, we've had a couple of really interesting moments, and I took the comment very subtly about Draco's wand as yet kind of more evidence. We had the chapter a few chapters ago when Draco sort of refused to identify Harry. We've sort of been seeing Draco struggle with where his allegiance lies and who he's loyal to and what he truly believes in this sort of battle or this war that's going on. And the fact that his wand is somewhat loyal to Harry, or at least it's not disloyal. He says, I think he even compares it to using Hermione's wand. It's similar. So it's acting as the wand of a friend. I think that's really interesting because that sort of parallels the fact that Draco is his friend, which is definitely not what we've come to learn over the past 6.5 books. But I thought that was a really interesting comment because it's not just that it was behaving as if it was a friend.
So I mean, it does seem like you're saying you're getting the feeling that Draco's feelings towards Harry have changed substantially, comparatively to even what they were last year, and I think that's, I would say, probably part of the process of how they've been changing because, Draco was only doing what he was doing last year because he had to, or else he would be dead, and so would his family. So I think that's a really good point, and it's a great connection. And so... Yeah.
And I think there was some ego last year from Malfoy because he was sort of doing what he needed to do to survive, and in that world of Death Eaters and Voldemort, weakness is a weakness, right? Not being egotistical and confident about it can get you killed,
right?
And so it was really interesting just to see that sort of manifesting. It's almost like the wand's betraying him a little bit and telling Harry something that Malfoy would never ever dream of telling him himself.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it's also interesting here too because we get a little bit more on this idea of them working with Griphook and how Harry is really kind of ready to be done with having to work with him because he's just so unpleasant, and he won't even really allow the kids to be able to talk together without him around, and even Ron's like, man, he could give my mom some lessons, and so...
And then when he is around, he's just not anyone you really want to spend any time with. He's just an unpleasant little man.
Yeah.
Very similar in my mind to Creature pre sort of change of heart, right?
Yes.
Harry just doesn't want him around and doesn't want to be around him. And Bill, you can see, I think we can kind of see it wearing on Fleur and Bill too, knowing that he's only still there because Harry's asked them to keep him there. And we sort of start this chapter with this backstory and are told that we're about to no longer have this be a thing, right? They're going to leave Shell Cottage. They're going to go to the title of this chapter, which is Gringotts, and it's all gonna start from here.
Yeah,
we're with that roller coaster. We're at that top when it gets really slow and it's climbing. We're about to just drop.
Well, and one thing before we get there, which is interesting, that goes along with the wands, is the fact that, Hermione was kind of complaining about the wand, too, because Ollivander had actually sent Luna a new wand that he made for her, which has her feeling jealous as well as Dean feeling jealous, because, he doesn't have a wand either. And I think it goes to show the impression that Luna made on Ollivander in helping him, get through the situation that they were both in at the Malfoys in the basement for so long. And so Harry had that moment of the when they were talking to Ollivander last time and kind of like not being sure about him. And yet we kind of see here, Ollivander really does have, he does have a heart. And Luna kind of grew into his heart. And so
she was a Grinch. His heart grew three
sizes that day. Exactly. At least towards Luna. And so.
Well, and I think that's something so good about Luna. Like, we talk a lot about how she's weird and awkward, and that's kind of the branding she gets at school, and she has weird beliefs, and her and her dad are sort of in their own world. But, you know, this is kind of that instance where she's just a very genuine, real, kind, caring person who managed to sort of find her way into the heart of someone by being incredibly authentic and supportive in a time of need.
Yeah.
And I think that's great, and that's, you know, just a statement to her character that she's able to do that.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and it's interesting. So, you know, we're going to leave this next day. They're going to be leaving for Gringotts. Of course, Hermione is turning into Bellatrix Lestrange. And I love, you know, Harry is waiting for her and Ron to come out. And he's looking at the stone that he put, you know, at Dobby's grave. And what's really interesting here is that we see it's been a while. I mean, the grave already has little shoots coming out of it of grass, and the stone already has kind of a weathered look to it. And, you know, Harry even thinks to himself how beautiful a place this is to, you know, be, you know, at rest for the rest of your life, you know, and death. This is a perfect place to have been buried, you know. And so it's really beautiful that, you know, we see that. And sadly, the beauty ends when Hermione walks out as Bellatrix Lestrange. And then we see her, she basically creates an entire look for Ron out of magic by growing him a beard and kind of like making his nose bigger and all sorts of things, which is, it just kind of goes to show, like, it's such a quick little scene, but I was reminded about how good Hermione is at magic, because this has to be some delicate magic to be working on somebody's face.
Well, with a wand that's not your wand, that you don't really connect with, right? We talked about that a little bit earlier. For her to be able to do that, she has to be an extraordinary wizard.
Right.
And it's, you know, I do like when she's all done too, Harry's like, I can tell it's Ron, but only because I know him so well. Yeah. That's how good she's able to sort of manipulate him. She takes away his freckles. She gives him different colored hair, different eyes, different nose, the whole thing. But yeah, it's pretty impressive. I mean, I'd let her do a facelift on me.
And I love where she's like, what do you think, Harry? And he's like, I mean, he's not really my type, but it'll do.
Yeah. I don't really go for that sort of thing. I wouldn't really date him, but sure, whatever.
Yeah, not my thing, but it is interesting too, because, you know, they're traveling. They apparate to the leaky cauldron, and you know, Harry has Griphook on his back, and they're under the invisibility cloak, and they're making their way to Gringotts, and they run into a Death Eater, and it turns out it's Travers. Quickly before that, you get people, you know, looking at Hermione / Bellatrix, and people like some guy comes up to her and is like, my children, and, you know, Hermione is having a hard time kind of playing the part for a while, but she gets into it, especially when they run into Travers, and he challenges her about, you know, her being out in the first place, and the fact that, you know, she has her wand, which he thought, you know, he heard that had been stolen. And so, yeah, this is really interesting, and kind of throws a wrench in their plans.
Well, and it's interesting because, you know, you mentioned she struggles to adopt her character. You know, Harry and Griphook point out that she's being too polite. And actually, when we talk about sort of the wizard, non-wizard, we are not really told, but the wandless, I guess they call him. She can't even deal with him. Ron has to do it for her. very much so embodying that sort of bodyguard moment, which I thought was really interesting, is that she's so caught off guard that he has to step in and do that he's able to portray that a little bit easier than she is.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, they just talk about the wandless. And so there's all of these people, and we kind of saw that at the beginning of the book with what, Dolores Umbridge was a part of, and it's basically taking wands away from wizards they don't deem legitimate.
They don't deem them wizardy enough.
Exactly. And so they end up making their way to Gringotts, and Travers actually has to go to Gringotts, and it's interesting, on their way there, he talks about how, he doesn't really enjoy the fact that they still have to work with the goblins. He calls them these consorting with our long-fingered friends. So it kind of shows you how, like, everything, like, they don't want anyone other than what they deem as pure blood wizards to be a part of anything in the wizarding world. And so, and of course, he feels very comfortable because he thinks he's talking to Bellatrix Lestrange. And they get to the door, and they realize that there are these probidity probes that are going to be used to tell whether or not, there's some sort of magic being used here to get you into Gringotts. And Harry confunds them, the guards, so that they can get in. So that's our first use here of a forbidden spell. Not really forbidden. I mean, confunding somebody is not terrible, but it's not the nicest spell to be used against somebody. But, I mean, what else are they going to do? I mean, they have to get into Gringotts. They have to find this Horcrux if they can. Yeah.
They managed to do it without Travers really noticing they're doing it either. And I like, after he does that, he's kind of pulled back to the first time he's in Gringotts, to a good memory. Mm-hmm. This is when he's learning about the wizarding world. And he's reminded of Hagrid, who we haven't talked about for so many chapters. And it reminded me that I miss Hagrid. And how he had said something along the lines of, like, you'd be crazy to try to rob Gringotts. And he's like, well, ain't that a kick in the pants? Mm-hmm. Is basically his attitude from there. Deep breath, we're going to go for it.
Well, once they get inside, they ask for identification, and Hermione/Bellatrix is like, nobody needs identification, and apparently her wand will do, and this is where things get really crazy, because they mention, you've gotten a new wand, and Travers is like, about to blow his top, because that shouldn't be a new wand. And so this is where we get Harry having to use a forbidden curse, and he uses the Imperious Curse so that he can control what they do. And he ends up having to put Travers as well as
two different
goblins under the curse so that they can make their way through. So, I mean, the plan is not going great right now.
Yeah. It's not going bad yet, but it's not going great either. Especially considering, he casts this and later says, I don't think it's really working. And Griphook reminds him, you have to mean it. Actually, I think he is reminded from Bellatrix's memory. Excuse me. Yep. He's reminded from the memory of Bellatrix that when you use one of those curses, you gotta mean it. And quite frankly, let's be honest, he doesn't mean it. He doesn't want to do this. He's doing it because he has to, not because he genuinely wants to be doing it. We get the impression, based on his need to use it, that they've been tipped off, and by them I mean Gringotts has been tipped off that potentially there will be imposters.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, they are able to make their way to the cart. And unfortunately, though, the cart falls through the waterfall of disenchantment, and Hermione is able to cushion their falls, but everything is not going correctly. And they are able to make their way to the vault as they pass a big white blind dragon that has unfortunately also been abused like crazy. And man, I do have to say, the look and the feel of the dragon in the movie, this is one of the places where I think they absolutely nailed it. Like, it was
this
really
whole
well done.
chapter. Yeah. This whole chapter minus Travers, because he is not in the movie.
Right.
At least not in this capacity in this chapter. I actually don't know if he's anywhere in the movie. Someone will message us and correct me later. He is not there. But other than that, I was thinking when I was reading this chapter that the movie did a pretty spectacular job of creating a good visual of what is happening here. And that dragon, to your point, is one of the big. That I think the waterfall and the dragon are two pieces that I feel like were quite excellent in the movie and true to the book.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, like that, they use these clankers to which the dragon has been trained that if he hears them, he's going to be in pain. And so they're able to get into the vault. And the problem, though, is that they don't know if they're looking for the cup, which Harry knows what that cup is because, of course, he saw it in the last book in one of the memories, which, of course, they cut out of the movie, which was so stupid. Well done, movies, for ruining a major plot point. Or he's like, or we just have to be looking for something that looks like it could belong to Ravenclaw, Rowena Ravenclaw,
And the only thing they can really think of, or they have visually for Ravenclaw, is the crazy concoction that Luna's dad has started to recreate of this. It wasn't the diadem; it was something else.
No, it was the diadem. Yeah, he created diadem, that crazy diadem that.
Yeah, and so that's the only thing they have to go on, which they also don't really know if to be honest, they don't know if it's true, if that's really what it looks like, considering all of the other fantastical things that Luna's dad has come up with. So they're kind of flying blind here in the Ravenclaw arena.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they realize that if they touch anything, there have been curses placed on trying to touch something. And if you try to touch something, it not only multiplies, but it burns. And so,
which is terrifying.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely terrifying. And
which they left that part out of the movie. I think it just sort of multiplied. They didn't really emphasize the burning in the movie.
Yeah, I don't think they really do either. I think you're right. And it's terrible, and they realize that they can't touch anything, but they do actually see the cup. They see Helga Hufflepuff's cup on a very high shelf, and even Ron, who's the tallest of them, can't reach it. And then Harry realizes, wait, could we use the sword? Could we pick it up with the sword? And they're able to try and do that. So, like, Griphook gets on his back, and they're trying to reach for it, and I mean, it's really a mess. And they are able to grab it, but unfortunately, in the process, everything is multiplying now. Everything is burning. Griphook is able to escape with the sword. They're able to make their way out of the vault. And there's only one way out of this is everything is converging on them. And well, it's to ride a dragon.
Yeah. Well, and even so, when they're still in the vault, we do see the fake sword of Gryffindor in there, which confirms that it kind of confirms and brings, hey, okay, so she thinks that's in her vault. All right, so there at least is a fake one there. Not sure why or how that happened, but it's there. And, as they realize they got to go, this is also the moment where Griphook betrays them with the sword, because in the midst of this chaos of him climbing on Harry to get the cup with the sword is dropped, and Griphook gets to it before Harry and starts yelling, "Thief, thief, thief!" And that's how, they're sort of forced out of this vault, trying to fend off as many of these Gringotts employees as possible. And that's where, to your point, they find their only option really is this dragon.
And I do think this is something that's interesting to me. In the movie, they change it so it's Hermione's idea, but here it's Harry's idea. And I will say that I think it makes more sense for this to be Harry's idea with his experience with dragons. He's, had up close and personal experience with them.
I can see it going either way, because the piece that doesn't happen here, that kind of happens a little bit in the movie and feels true to Hermione's character, is her sort of total and utter disgust with the fact that this dragon is here in the first place, and the way that it's totally been, treated. And mistreated, I guess, is probably better. And so in my mind, in the movie, it's Hermione's idea because she's also trying to save the dragon, right? And so that's why I can really see it going either way. I totally agree with your point that Harry has more experience with actively riding dragons and would think to ride a dragon. But for me, Hermione's trying to save a poor, abused magical creature also totally fit in character.
Yeah.
I could see happen.
Well, and I think one of the things, here, in the movie, there's a sense of urgency, but I feel like there's even more urgency here. There's no time for them to be, having those kind of reaction moments, really, because there's just, there isn't any time. And so, but what I love, though, is that as they're escaping on the dragon, as they're crawling their way up, Hermione is actually using spells to help widen the gap for the dragon to be able to make their way through. She's helping enlarge the passageway, which is fantastic. And before they know it, they have crashed their way out of the top of Gringotts and are launching themselves into the sky. And such an exciting way to end the chapter. But sadly, Griphook escaped with the sword. So they don't have a way to destroy this Horcrux the same way they did the last one. So we've solved one problem, but we've also gained another problem. And
we've made steps in one direction. It's that 2 steps forward, 1 step back problem, right? They solve one issue only to be revisited by one that they thought they had previously solved, which I think everyone can relate to being there. We think we have something fixed. We totally don't. And we're confronted with that again. Very relatable, very frustrating. But it also gives them a little momentum, right? They've got a little bit of wind beneath their wings, literally in this case. And it's going to give them kind of some power to push forward and keep charging in this direction. Because this is now the second Horcrux they found in less than 6 months. I mean, that feels like a really long time, but within a very quick period of time. And so, I think that's gonna do some stuff for them. I mean, it would do something for me. I don't know about you.
Oh, I think it's absolutely going to do something for them, and it's going to be fascinating to see where they go now with the rest of the book. I mean, we're going to be flying through the rest, and so I'm really excited to finish up here this last book this year. But Andrea, if anybody wants to catch up with you here in 2021 and see how things are going, where can they find you?
Sure, you can find me on Twitter at PCFcheck or on Instagram at Andrea Coffman, and it's Coffman.
And you could find me, if I'm on that social media platform, it's going to be MattRushing02, so just look for me there. You can also find me here on the network doing Aggressive Negotiations, a Star Wars podcast with John Mills. Is every week we talk about Star Wars. It's so much fun. And then on the Track FM network doing 3 shows. One is called the 602 Club, which is our General Geek show, which I mentioned earlier, where we've talked about all the Harry Potter movies, Fantastic Beasts movies, but all the fandoms that we love. You can also follow us on Twitter at the 602 Club, so please do. And then you can find me doing Literary Treks and The Orb, both with Chris Jones. Literary Treks is about the books and the comics of Star Trek, and then The Orb is about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. But thank you so much for checking your outpost.
Mischief managed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.